Residents and ratepayers of the Howick ward, and my name is Michael Williams. I'm the chairman of the Howick local board, and we are facilitating this meeting tonight. The format tonight, we are going to ask the Mayor to say a few words about his vision and about his long-term plan. And that will take approximately 10 to 15 minutes. We're then going to ask our councillors to give us a few words, and we're then going to proceed to some questions from our resident and ratepayer chairs. And then, after we've taken a question each, we're going to open it up to a few questions from the floor. And then we're going to come back for another round of questions and then take a few more questions from the floor. That format is designed to give everyone an opportunity to speak, but I would like to tell you that our resident ratepayer chairs have spent some time. Thank you very much, Bob Trouts, for coming along and explaining to them in some detail the provisions of the plan. So our chairs are well prepared and have a good understanding of the matters in hand. The purpose of this meeting really is to deal with the issue of council expenditure, of CBD projects, of rates and of debt. And those are all matters that I'm sure are dear to your hearts, having come along this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our Mayor, Len Brown, up onto the stage. Thank you, Len.
If any of you got a Leamington here, I prefer that you give it to me rather than send an email. And if it's pink, I don't want it. I prefer chocolate. I've got to say to you that I'm looking forward to this meeting tonight. It makes a hell of a change from talking about the ports. And whenever I want to talk about rates, because I want to talk about my vision for Auckland, you've read enough about that. Previously, the Mayor of Manukau, and now as the Mayor for all of Auckland, if I ever wanted a good rates discussion and to get a good sense of where people were in terms of what we're doing with rates, this is the place to come. I've given it one round so far on Buckland's Beach, and I see one or two people who have been with me in that meeting, and that was a good meeting, wasn't it, Alice? And now I'm looking forward to this meeting. I've only got 10 minutes. I'll probably keep it even shorter than that, because I suspect you've got a lot more questions than you're going to get answers tonight. And so what I want to say for a start is that the big challenge, and for those of you who actually voted for me, thank you. It's been a hell of a job. But good times and bad in particular, yesterday, I still love the job. And I want to thank you for making me your mayor. Secondly, in terms of the challenges that we would face, the biggest challenge was going to be amalgamating the rates. The biggest challenge in Manukau, you recall, was that we changed from local value, from land value rather, to annual rental value about 4 or 5 years ago. It gave rise to a fairly significant discussion, and so I knew that if I became the Mayor for all of Auckland, the big debate this year would be about amalgamating the rates and how that would impact on the ratepayers, because I knew it would impact differently across different parts of the city. The statute was quite clear, 7 systems plus the ARC rate into one bill, under capital value. No argument, no debate, that's it. And so I knew and talked about this during the course of the campaign, that would impact differently across different parts of the city, and we would only be able to deal with that in terms of moderating that impact by how we dealt with the UAGC, what we would do with our wastewater, and then how we might deal with the transition to moderate the impact on the ratepayers. So, as we expected with the amalgamation, the immediate impact on the amalgamation was that it had an impact in particular in this part of town. I don't even talk about other parts of town. It had an impact here. And so the impact was such that we now were confronted with, so where do we put the UAGC to moderate that impact? And then how do we deal with the issue of wastewater charges? Now the UAGC across town, quite diverse. And when I'm town, I'm talking about Auckland. 308 in Auckland City, 320 in the old Manukau City, and 831 in North Shore City, 700 or 630 odd in Waitakere. Quite diverse right across the city. Bringing the whole rating system together, where do we find the even space? I proposed $350 as a UAGC, right in the middle. We could have gone to $750 UAGC, but if we'd done that, it would have meant that lower media value properties would have borne the brunt of the change, and 35% more ratepayers would have changes above 10%. Now I know there are many of us sitting in here, many around the Howard and Eastern communities who have significant potential, significant increases under the amalgamated change. But under 750, that's what it would have been. And if we'd gone to 450 rather than 350, and there's been a big shout out for that around these communities. And I have to say to you, I'm listening. You know me, I'll change my mind if I think I'm wrong. So I'm listening here tonight. You can start shaking your head, mate, but my history shows it. And so I'm listening, but listen to these figures. For a number of ratepayers with rate increases greater than 20%, with a 350 UAGC, 42,168. With a 450 UAGC, 36,360. But for a number of ratepayers with changes between 10 to 20%, so that's got to be most people, 84,997 with 350 UAGC. Listen to these big figures of people who are getting significant rate increases as a consequence of the change. But with 450, 93,225. So those with higher increases, smaller numbers slightly, though with loads of lower increases, but between 10 and 20% increase, higher numbers. In the end, about me. So these numbers suggest to me that we're pretty close to being about right in terms of the overall impact of the UAGC as we try to moderate the impact of the amalgamated rate system. So that's the first point. I think we're about right, and I want to say to you that in terms of the view across the region, and so as the Mayor for all of Auckland, I have to be mindful of the views across all of the region and try and find a balance for everyone. And it's not easy to be fair and equitable to everybody. Not just those on higher value, but those on lower value. We have gone at 350, and we've done that on the basis that we think it's a fair point in the middle. Now, so that's the UAGC. The second possibility for actually moderating the impact of the rates is the use of our wastewater charge. Now I set this at 190 and asked the council to support it, and they basically came in behind and supported that. At 190 plus, that's the fixed charge plus a user charge. Now we never had that in Manukau. We had a fixed charge at about $320. Now this is a change for us. And it's a change that impacts mostly on medium and large size families, but for those of you who are elderly in particular, on fixed income sitting in single or only two-person homes, this is of great benefit. It drops significantly your costs in terms of wastewater charges. It gives us, this is the argument that we had here, remember? It gives us problems with families because they're going to pay more for their wastewater charges. But for those of you who are elderly, one or two only in the household, it certainly is a reduction. So, with both of those, UAGC of 350, and the wastewater charge of $1.90 plus a user charge on your use of water, it moderates to some extent the increase that you are looking to face as a consequence of the amalgamation of our rating system. Thirdly, I want to talk about the rates rebate to those who are elderly and are entitled to receive it. We've always struggled to get people to get full benefit of that $500 that's available to them in terms of a rating rebate. Now, I've sent a letter off to Nick Smith and asked him to one, simplify the system so that people don't feel as if it's such an imposition on them, and secondly, it's a simpler process than it is at the moment. Now, I've been into these sort of arguments with the government before, and sometimes they lead nowhere. But I've given my undertaking that we're going to try and get a much simpler rates rebate system, that those who are elderly actually get the opportunity to get all of or part of the rates rebate system they don't get at the moment. At this point, we only have a 1/3 uptake of the rates rebate system. It's just useless. And we've got to make a change to it. So I've asked the government to assist us to make the change. Now, so we've got the amalgamated rate system, we've got the UAGC, and we can argue about where exactly we put that, but that still in the end does not deal with those significantly of rate increases above 10%, 15%, 20% as a consequence of the amalgamation of the rating system. So the next thing that we have to consider is what sort of transition we put in place. Now, previously, in the early part of the discussion for the long-term plan for our budget, we were proposing that we would put in place a transition that means it would cap 15% increase in any 1 year over a 3-year transition period to give some sort of equity to the change. Now, what we've decided to do, and I spent a lot of time over Christmas thinking, well, God, we've got to be able to get it lower than that. I listened to the views coming through from these communities and communities around Auckland and said, okay, let's try and moderate the impact as much as we can. What else can we do? So we have proposed, and the council has accepted with 1 or 2 exceptions, that we go back to government and say, okay, can you give us a transition, either an order in council that caps for 3 years any potential rate increase until we get to the end of the transition period for the amalgamation of the rates change to a maximum of 10% increase. Now, at this point in time, we're having discussions with the Minister. I'm hopeful that he agrees. But to get that, we're asking those in the region, for example in Waitakere and Rodney and Franklin and Papakura, to get, over that 3-year period, a reduced decrease to what they are presently entitled. And by and large, the response thus far, except from the Waitakere business community, is yes. They are prepared to give their immediate benefit to enable us to get a transition to minimise, well not minimise, but reduce the impact of the rates change. So we're doing everything we can within a difficult situation to find a greater share of equity or less impact than what's happened in terms of the amalgamation. Now, I want to deal with, how am I going for time? Have I just about done my time? I just wanted to deal quickly with the issue of debt. This is an issue that's of continuing and immediate. How are we going to time? So we can deal with that in terms of questions. Okay. 1 minute to deal with that. Love this. So we've got a $3 billion debt that we've inherited from all of the councils coming together. $30 billion worth of assets, $3 billion worth of debt, give or take. And we've taken on, within that, a $500 million debt to enable us to put in place a full electric rail system, 58 trains and carriages across the whole of our rail network. We are investing in transport to give us a full integrated transport system and get this city moving. And so we've taken on that debt burden. Over the next 10 years, we are looking at a significant investment in this city. Probably deal with this by way of questions as we go. But we are looking at a potential debt burden of taking our debt from the present $3 billion, potentially up to $8 to $9 billion over 10 years. Now, Standard & Poor's had a long hard look at us, and they looked in particular at our proposed investments, at our income streams, at our budgets, at our assets, but in particular at what we were proposing to borrow to build Auckland. At the end of the day, they decided to leave our AA rating, the third highest credit rating in this world, in place when they sank half the credit ratings of Europe and our 4 primary banks. And they basically said, yep, we think you guys are managing things reasonably well considering, 1, the transition change, and 2, what you're intending to do over the next 10 to 30 years. Now, the other thing that they actually considered, I wasn't at these meetings, but I suspect this is what they did. 10-year plans are hard plans to actually be completely affirmative about. What's going to happen over the next 10 years? The government doesn't do 10-year financial plans. They struggle to do a 1 and 2-year financial plan. We've got to do a 10-year financial plan based on our projections for spending and investment. So we did a 10-year plan. What is not said is whether or not through the work that we do, whether we do use infrastructure bonds rather than borrowing from banks, whether we do private-public partnerships and put in place, for example, for the inner-city rail tunnel, a private-public partnership whereby either internal or overseas project manager and investor actually does that project and then we pay it back over a 30-year period. It also did not consider, and what I suspect may have actually won it, was that over the next 10 years we're going to start to fully depreciate the asset base of this council. So by the end of year 10 we will be 100% depreciating the Auckland Council asset base. Now, for you to get some sort of handle on this, in Manukau we used to depreciate at about 65-66% per annum. We're going to go to 100%, and what that will do at the end of the 10-year period is start retiring debt at up to $200 million per annum. So, there is a plan in place. And S&P had a long hard look at that plan. And so I'm not saying to you here tonight that it's a perfect plan. But what I am saying to you is that I was voted in on a platform of transformation of our transport system in particular, and I want us to invest in our transportation system and get this city moving. Whatever your views on rates and debt and all the other issues, you know we've got a problem. And the last person, I'm just going to finish this, Mike. The last person who actually stood in front of you, and for those of you who are old enough you'll know this, was Doug Robinson, and he said that we need to get rail as a part of a coordinated answer to our transport problems. And at that point in time they said, no, we can't afford it, no, it's not the right time, no, we're not going to get the growth. Well, what I'm saying to you is that we've got to actually not put these problems off anymore. Now, I do believe that we can actually afford to deal with this change, use our very best advice, and actually get the changes made and invest in this city's future for all of us. So, Michael, I'm sorry I'm a bit over time, but it's great to be here and I'm looking forward to your questions.